What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Player One versus the World, and for more Life is Strange content. And the person I have is Life is Strange royalty, because if you don't know them, shame on you. And if you do, then great, because you'll be loving what they contributed to this series. So I have absolute pleasure of welcoming on Steph Trivison. We will get into who Steph is in a minute. But before that, and I hate doing this as always, if you are new here, please do consider dropping subscribe on the channel, turn notifications, like the video, share with your friends. Helps keep up to date with all the Life is Strange content. We do a lot of Life is Strange content. We recently interviewed Abby Nissenbaum. We will speak about her very shortly as well, Steph. And we do a lot of Life is Strange content. We cover people's stories. We cover content from the series, so do stay tuned with that. But as I said, Steph Trivison is here. Steph, I usually try and give people an introduction of who they are. You know, your music's in Life is Strange, and we'll come on to that a bit more. But the main point is you, if anything, because I love learning about the Americans, especially where they move. And we've kind of talked about this off podcast. It's a bit cheating, but we kind of like know about your journey in certain places where you moved, etc. But for the listeners, they might not know. And for me, it's cheating when I research the person. So who is Steph Trivison? Give us an idea of who you are. Was it always the aspiration to be a musician, or did you kind of fall into this?
Yeah, well, and thank you for having me. But I'm from a long line of musicians. My dad is a musician still. My grandpa, his dad, was a musician. I've had a grandma and a great grandma who were singers. So music was kind of always around, started super early. And, you know, like learned to play drums and then learned to play guitar. And so just kind of amassed all these different instruments over time. So always been something I've loved to do. There's actually a photo of me when I was 3 holding this like plastic red guitar and with a microphone and just like singing so passionately. So it's clear that it was very much in the DNA, and like it was probably going to be a part of my life in some way. But yeah, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, in the States, and moved to North Carolina a few years ago. It was like a pandemic move. And that move kind of like set the stage for a shift in my musical career from playing in like indie rock bands in Cleveland to now really being a producer and a songwriter. So yeah, that's the quick and dirty of it, but always been a musician, have always wanted to do it, and I've continued doing it all these years.
It's a very cool backstory, and you kind of bled into my next question. But before I go on to that, you said the musical background is in the family. What kind of like instruments did they play with the singers? You said about the grandfather, your father. Like what was their music style?
Yeah, so my grandpa, my dad and my grandpa both play guitar. And my dad can play, you know, at sort of a, I don't want to say basic level, but he can play a little bit of piano. He can play a little bit of drums, right? Much like me. I'm not like a virtuoso in anything. I just play enough instruments well enough that I can kind of put together a song, which is really like very essential to be a producer. But my grandpa played guitar as well, and his style, so he was born in the 30s. So he was coming up during, you know, he did a lot of jazz guitar, you know, a lot of like influences from the 40s and 50s. And he and my dad were actually in a band together when I was a kid. And they did like old standards, you know, and sort of like 50s pop, but they would branch out. They also did Play That Funky Music, White Boy, right? Like just a pretty wide range of music. They were a cover band. So I grew up watching, I would go to their gigs, the ones that were at like restaurants or more kid-friendly environments. I would go watch them play, and I joined them on stage once and played a Beatles song. So yeah, always around, but primarily guitar was the kind of like main instrument for both of them, and it is also my main instrument.
It's nice that DNA is connected perfectly there.
Yeah.
I could sit here for hours listening to the lineage of the family having musical instruments, but we are here for Steph Trivison. And as you said as well, in there as well, my next question was going to be about, you know, the fact that you have like a background in different things. So it's like, you know, you do producing, you do songwriting, but then it seems like there you made that transition away from what the conventional musician is, or conventional, as I should put it like that, where it's like, you know, want to be a singer, you want to work in a band. Why make that drastic decision? Because like that feels like if anything, from my outside perspective, like the next progression in your career. But how did you come to that realization you wanted to move more to this technical side and like produce music, if anything?
Yeah, well, I always really loved recording before I even like understood it. My growing up, my dad had this 4-track, this Tascam 4-track, which in like the 80s and 90s, that was kind of the way to do home recording. And I fell in love with that so early and was like writing my own songs and stuff. But then I thought, yeah, the next thing as a teenager was to be in a band, and I was in a lot of like really bad punk rock bands. I say bad. I don't mean to like disparage but you know, as a teenager, you're just like figuring it out. It just wasn't that great at that point. And so I did this like rock band thing for a while, which really gave me a lot of exposure, experience, confidence. It was a great learning tool, I think, from a songwriting perspective. I was always kind of like the primary songwriter in whatever bands I was in. So I did that for a long time, but gigging, I don't know how much you know about like the behind the scenes of playing shows and stuff. Gigging is brutal. It's, you know, when you're in more of like an indie kind of band, you might load into a show at like 4 p.m. and then do your sound check and wait around until 10 p.m. to play a 30-minute set. And you're sweaty and you're like lifting all of this gear, and then you have to stick around to the end of the show. And that's like maybe 1, 2 in the morning that you're loading out. It just was really tough. And as we were saying a little bit earlier off air, I also have a full-time job. So it was just like really challenging to manage that. And so for me, recording and focusing on production allowed me to do things in a time window that was better for me, and also just isn't nearly as grueling. I get to do what I love, is like the creation part, without all the hassle of what comes with performing live.
I know, I appreciate the honesty, because the work-life balance needs to be done. Like the white hairs are getting on me. I'm getting older, and it's like I need to like balance my work. So it's like, even when I do the interviews, I schedule them, I get everything prepared. It's like people like I say this to people, like I balance things so carefully just to keep myself going. So I completely understand the transition. I also get your indie band thing, because I live in the north of England, and it's like there's a massive surgence of people who want to be in indie bands, and the amount that I see collapse, which obviously because of the grueling schedule and stuff. Not that these people aren't talented, it's just that you're in an industry where you're fighting with everyone else. It's very cutthroat, and then to put that legwork in is just very difficult to keep it on a consistent basis. But not to dimmy down everything here, obviously, because it's really great to talk to a musician as always. But what are Steph's musical influences? What are some of the musicians and artists that have shaped your life? Obviously, we spoke about your father, the family, that they had the influences. But talk to me about your music. Like, how has it been influenced? Who are some of the influences that have like impacted you?
Yeah. Well, in a very cliche way, my first favorite band were the Beatles. And I think I learned the Beatles and the Beach Boys, really. I learned a lot of harmony from them without even understanding that it was harmony. It was just like, oh, I hear this part and I'm going to sing it. So I think that was really crucial, because I do a lot of vocal stacking, where I sing a lot of different parts. So that was really influential. As I got a little bit older, I discovered, some really excellent songwriters. One of my favorites is this guy named Butch Walker, who was in a band called the Marvelous Three, but he's had a long successful solo career, but he is also kind of a producer by day. So he's produced like Fall Out Boy and Avril Lavigne and Jewel and like just all kinds of different artists. And that affords him his kind of solo career as well. So I really modeled a lot of what I do after my love for this guy. But I love a lot of music, I can get down with everything from country and hip hop and rock, and like it doesn't matter to me. I just really love music.
Oh, I can absolutely tell. And before we move on as well, Beatles, what's your favorite track and who's your favorite member of the Beatles?
Oh, that is so hard. Well, so for a long time, I would have just said John. I feel like in recent years, I'm shifting to more of a Paul fan. Favorite track though, so I like the stuff that I grew up on was like early Beatles, like really poppy. They hadn't gotten kind of like strange yet, you know, like pre and I love Sergeant Pepper's, but like pre Sergeant Pepper's stuff was what I mainly grew up on. So that's really hard. I'd say though, probably if I had to just choose, In My Life is coming to mind. I really love In My Life.
Good picks all around.
Yeah,
I'm personally a Ringo fan, but I only pick Ringo because he's forgotten. And John Lennon said that he wasn't even the best drummer in the Beatles.
yeah.
And I always feel sorry for Ringo. So I'm a Ringo fan all the way.
Well, Ringo was my entryway into music. I watched Help. My dad had Help playing the movie, and Ringo was like the star of Help. And I was like, I have to have a drum set. Like, I want to play drums. It was really because of Ringo, and that was my first instrument. So I'm a Ringo fan too.
Yeah, we got to support Ringo. I've got to give him love for how John did him dirty there.
Yeah, right.
But no, that's really fascinating to hear. And then I think this part, if I'd never heard of Steph, I know sacrilegious, absolutely sacrilegious. What would be the best way to describe your music? Because obviously I've spent enough time listening to it, and obviously the track that we'll be talking about shortly. But what's the kind of pitch for someone who's never heard of Steph Trivison and the music that you create?
Yeah, it's a little challenging because the music that I create, particularly for sync licensing, is very like custom made for a vibe. So it can be a lot of different genres. But I'd say the kind of like through line, the thread for me is always, like I was saying before, sort of like stacked vocals, usually pretty polished, like a high fidelity type production, pretty poppy. The thing that got me into sync licensing was that I was writing very hooky. Even though I was in like rock bands, I was writing a lot of hooks. So the songs that I write I really lean into creating a melody that you can instantly remember. So I'd say that's also kind of a through line, no matter the genre that I'm working in, is really trying to make something very catchy.
It is very catchy, and again, we'll come on to that song because I've been listening to it all day, and I forgot how catchy it was until I started preparing for this interview. I was like, damn, she's very good. But to wrap up this part of the music conversation, don't worry, we will continue the music conversation, but in the Life is Strange way. But with this, we've talked about your music influences, we talked about a lot of music, but we open up your music library, Apple or Spotify, whichever one it is. Who are your go-to musicians right now? Who are you listening to? Who are you vibing off?
This is another hard question for me. I would say I'm listening a lot to sort of like female songwriter stuff right now. The new like Billie Eilish record, Maggie Rogers, Boy Genius. I've just loved Boy Genius in the last few years. They say that you get to a certain age and you kind of fall back to all of your old tracks that you love. I did just listen to the Butch Walker record yesterday that I first fell in love with. It's an album called Letters. So that's an oldie but a goodie. Yeah, a lot of like singer-songwriter stuff.
Nice. I'm sure there's no Abby Nissenbaum in there, but
Abby. So it's funny because like when you're a producer and you work with an artist, like I've listened to Abby's songs because I helped create them probably hundreds of times. So by the time they're actually released, it's like, my brain is elsewhere, right? But yeah, I know every word to all of her songs that we've done together.
Well, I'm sure she'll appreciate when she sees that. I caught her out in my interview. I said to her, I was like, what's your favorite song from the Life is Strange series? And she picked something else. I was like, Not Your Love. And it's like, and then you quickly see the back walk on that. But I brought it up there as well, which is Your Love. So I've kind of written this out as well for the elephant in the room for people who don't remember. You're Steph Gingrich. You're in Life is Strange, True Colors. You're in the Rocky Mountain Record Traders. And you're in the Wavelengths DLC. And when you walk into her radio booth, you hear this banging song that is playing in the background. And it is none other than Your Love, which is music created by Steph Trivison. So obviously that is the kind of talking point. We're on the Life is Strange channel. I love giving people who have anything to do with Life is Strange a platform to talk about it. How did your music end up in Life is Strange, True Colors' Wavelengths DLC?
Yeah, a little bit of a mystery. Well, so I wrote that song. So I work, like I was saying before, in sync licensing, which is sort of creating music with the specific purpose of getting it in games, on TV and films. And sometimes that means writing custom songs for the whatever the platform is going to be. And other times that means you're creating songs in advance, not knowing where they are going to land, but trying to create a song that has a certain vibe so that it will be placed somewhere. Placements is like the use of the song. So this particular song, I was the latter. I was really just trying to think ahead of like what kind of song, what might be used in one of these platforms. And I wrote Your Love, and the inspiration for it, I was thinking like, if there were a modern day Veruca Salt from Willy Wonka, the sort of like bratty teenager who gets everything that she wants, like what is the equivalent of that? And I thought like, sorry to like bash on influencer culture, but kind of like I thought Veruca Salt would be an influencer today for sure, right? She'd be like selling skincare or whatever on Instagram. And so I was like, if I were this like modern day Veruca Salt character, how would I write a song? And so that first verse, both of the verses really, is like just kind of listing off like all the cool stuff I'm doing because I'm this influencer type. And so it was just kind of a funny concept. And so when you're working in sync licensing, oftentimes you're creating relationships with publishers who have the connections to video game companies and have the connections to like TV networks. And so this song was picked up by a publisher, and that publisher was like, hey, we feel like we can make this more of a Christmas song. Can you change the lyrics in the chorus to like set a holiday kind of tone? And so we changed the words from I always get what I want, and what I want is your love, which is very Veruca Salt again. We changed the lyrics from that to it's my favorite time of year, and all I want is your love. So it became this like sort of Christmas song, and that's how they used it in the game, is like it's sort of like the winter season of Life is Strange, and it's like this holiday song in the background. So it was just picked up. I mean, it was one of those songs, like I said, that I did not create custom for the game, but the publisher, sold it in, and it worked really well, I think, for that specific sort of like DJ booth setting.
Is that process difficult, changing things when they request things? Because it seems like obviously we made it Christmassy, but like what I find fascinating that you've just kind of told me about this, because I was completely unaware of it. Like I feel like when you have a vision of writing a song, you have something in mind, but then you have this mind with Veruca Salt and kind of the influencer culture, but you're basically writing with like a projection of the future, because like there's no kind of like set task you're working on. It's not like you're creating music specifically for Steph Gingrich, even though it fits very seamlessly with her style. But like, is it difficult when they make requests, and like how easy is it to kind of like adapt to it? And when you create a song as well, are you intentionally quite flexible with it in terms of like the lyrics you write, just so in case they do make a request, for example?
I would say it's like yes and no. I mean, I definitely always know going in that things can change. And so to not feel too married to a particular concept, I also create a ton of music. So it's a little bit easier to separate myself if it's like, oh, I have to change this one line. But there have been times where I've really fallen in love with like a concept. And like I'm working on a song right now that we had to change. It was a little darker. The lyrical content was sadder, I guess. And sad doesn't work super well for sync licensing. So like the publisher came back and was like, hey, can we twist this? Can we spin it a bit so that it's a more positive message, which will probably increase the likelihood that it's used somewhere. But I really loved that original lyric. So I think I know going in always that could potentially be, that things might be changed. Usually it doesn't bother me. Sometimes I'm like, oh man, I really liked it the old way. But ultimately it's about it getting used. So I'm always game for it.
No, absolutely. And obviously, like when I was listening to it on YouTube, there were names. There was Crispy Harris, Daniel Kenneth
Yeah.
Solovitz, and Stephanie Ann Trivison as well. So we can use your full name there as well.
Yeah.
Like, break me down that track. Who's who on the track? Obviously, we have Steph here, and she can give us the full insight on like who contributed what to this track.
Yeah, so Dan and Chris are known as Mayhem Music Production. They're a music production company essentially, and they I really owe all of my sync licensing success to them. They were my like foot in the door, and so Dan is the producer of the group. Chris is an incredible rapper, and he also is a really good businessman. And so Chris kind of like works the opportunities, makes sure that, you know, we're meeting all of the expectations of the publishers that we're working with. And on this particular song, he did not rap on it, but he did manage all of the kind of like business in and outs. Dan produced this song, and I top-lined it, which is the top lining is when you write the lyrics and the melody and sing it. So I did that for this track. I've done a ton of songs with them. If you search me online, you'll see DJ Skrilla and Dan Solovitz on everything. Sometimes we collaborate. Like I just did a record with them. We just finished last week, and I produced a bunch of the tracks and handed them over, and Dan co-produced them. And so it is kind of a free-flowing collaboration. But this particular song, was produced by Dan. I top-lined, and Chris kind of handled all the business stuff.
So that is you singing in it, just to clarify.
Yep.
Did you channel the inner, like, you know, young emo pop punk days? Because like I've seen like I can kind of hear it now, because I was wondering if it was that you were just a producer or if you were the lyrics, but like how did you get into that mindset? Because there's a lot of for me, I could see like head thrashing whilst you were doing that.
Yeah. Well, they had so the brief, the initial like request on like, hey, we need a song that sounds like X. I think the initial request was Pink. And I was a teenager when like the emo scene was at the height. So listening to like Taking Back Sunday and The Used, and My Chemical Romance, I like came up in that era. So the like, heavier emotional stuff I was always really into. But I would say Pink has, she's a poppier version of that, right? She's like a rock star in a pop world. So I used that as a reference. I used like Avril Lavigne as a reference, just those like edgier pop female vocalists. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to write. It's like music that I really enjoy, so it was fun to write.
I can imagine, and I think we've kind of talked about the inspiration marks I had it in here, but like how long did this track take to create, and then what's the kind of workflow? Is it that you record the song, you send it on to someone else, it comes back to you with feedback? Kind of like walk me through that, because I have no experience in music, and it's always interesting to see how a song comes about, because I'm the person that enjoys listening to it, but obviously the intricate fine details of creating it is quite something.
Yeah, well, this song did not take very long, and it happens sometimes where a song will take you months, or even for some people even years. Or you might write a song in like a half hour. And this was one of the quicker ones for me. It all came together pretty, like I had the verses right away, and then the chorus was easy. The process is probably different for everyone, but the general experience is that once you have your lyrics and your melody set, you need to go into a studio and record it. I happen to have my own like home setup, as you can see here. So I tracked it myself, and that's how I always work with Mayhem music production. I'll track my stuff here. I'll kind of write my melodies, write my lyrics, record it, and then send it off to them to work into the production. Or if I've produced it myself, I'll send my instrumental tracks along with the vocals. And then, it gets mixed. Sometimes there are edits. Sometimes it's like, hey, can you just sing this note instead of the one you did? Like, it's just little stuff. Or can you deliver it with, more punch, or, a performative kind of change. But more often than not, we've been working together so long that I kind of just like know what everybody's looking for, and I'll just record, write it, record it, send it off, and then it's in someone else's hands. So it can be very like assembly line style.
Mm. I can see that and how it obviously eventually comes together, and it's great to listen to, and in the lyrics as well. I kind of wanted to know, is there a certain line of lyric that you really prefer? Because I actually had here, I always get what I want, and all I want is your love, and that was my favorite line from the entire lyrics. But I was wondering, what's your favorite lyric that you wrote in that song?
Oh man, the one that I sing around the house, and I'm probably gonna botch it right now, but the in the second verse, it's like, I think it's like flash bulbs, polished pearls, I'm a Turks and Caicos girl, I'm wherever you want to be. It just, to me, was like encapsulating of that whole like influencer thing. And there were sometimes when I write songs, they're a little bit predictive of the future, which sounds strange, but there's a couple of moments that, I wrote this song like 5 years ago, and a couple of things sort of came true. One of which is I talk about like bleach blonde hair, or like, I forget how I phrase it, but I had never dyed my hair, and I went blonde a few years after that song came out. And then I actually went to Turks and Caicos this year. So I was predicting my own story, I think.
Were you playing the song whilst you were doing it as well? It would be
I should have been. No, I wasn't, but it should have been like the jam of the vacation.
No, and obviously it's interesting you mentioned all that, because I think like at the beginning there's a reference to Tesla in the song, and then one of the other things I noticed as a reference, and other people noticed, was Bone Thugs as well, which is a reference.
Right.
Was that always planned to have Bone Thugs as a reference in there when you were writing it?
No, that was one of those things that just like, it was like the right syllable content, the right sound. And it was just, to me, it was like one of the most out there references I could have put. Like, it just felt unusual and so specific. And also like that a choir would be singing a Bone Thug. Like, I don't know. It just felt like this mashing of worlds. It was kind of fun. I have seen in the YouTube, like on some videos on YouTube, people commenting that they really like the Bone Thugs reference. I don't know. And the Bone Thugs guys are from Cleveland, so maybe there was some subconscious thing that I was giving a shout out to some local heroes, but yeah, just random.
And, I like that though. I like that it's actually caught on with other people and they've noticed it as well. I kind of wanted to ask you as well, because obviously we now know that you've worked on the track. You obviously have the publisher get in contact with you. It's through Sync Music, and then it's that kind of expectation. Like, I don't know if you knew where it was going to be put in the game or if you didn't. What was it like, obviously, eventually finding, because you're trolling through Wavelengths now, and then we eventually hear it, it's smack bang in the moment that Steph walks into the studio, it's playing. What was the reaction like when you found it, and did you know they were going to use it specifically in that segment?
I did not, and I should send you a video, because I have the moment that I learned that it was being used on tape, on video. So yeah, a lot of times with these like sync licensing kind of songs, you have no idea where the stuff's going to land, and because there are, on a TV show, you could have 100 cues, 100 pieces of music used. So the shows and the games often don't tell you. They just, kind of have your permission from what you've created for that publisher. And so you find out after the fact. But in this case, Chris Harris, DJ Skrilla, who, like I said before, is sort of like, the business guy, but also a great rapper. He reached out to me, and he reached out to my partner ahead of time and was like, hey, Steph got a video game. Like, I need you to record this phone call that I'm about to make. So he calls me and tells me that I got a video game. This was my first video game placement. And he starts to tell me the story that it's for this character named Steph, who's like a queer musician. It just, all of the parallels were really lining up. But it was a complete surprise. And that was sort of intentional on Chris's part. He wanted to like catch me off guard and like give me this great news. But it was awesome. And I think, if I haven't actually watched the video in a minute, but I think my response is no fucking way. I think I said something like no fucking way. So yeah, it was awesome moment, really cool moment, captured it, and an exciting like evolution in my personal career, you know.
No, I can imagine it. It's quite wild to see where they put the content in there, because some people just record things when you do stuff like this for studios, and because they're heavily NDA things, they don't necessarily tell you where it's going to be put in there. But that's quite cool that you were able to see that as the reaction. And obviously, another elephant in the room I have, which I think might answer this as well. I was banging into this on YouTube, but then I was like, Steph Trivison's "This Is a Vibe," and I want to put it in my Apple Music or my Spotify library. And unfortunately, I couldn't find it. And then I went onto YouTube, and there were a lot of comments saying, why is this not in my Spotify music library? And why is this not in my Apple Music library? Is there a specific reason why you have not been able to put it onto those? Because I imagine it'll just be like, go-to tracks for people to listen to.
Well, it's a great question, and it's one of the challenges with creating music for sync licensing specifically. So sometimes some publishers allow you to release music as like your name, as your artist name. Mm-hmm. Other publishers want it to be under their names or their like, sort of like imprint name. This particular publisher was one of those that did it under their name. And also, so the record that this song is a part of, you can kind of consider it to be like a compilation. It's there are a lot of different artists who are contributing to this overall. I think it's called like Modern Holiday Hits or something. This overall record, and I had a couple songs on there, but that was one of them. So it actually is on streaming, but you can't find it by searching my name. So it's a little bit tricky. This is I feel like publishers are moving more towards allowing you to put the songs under your name so that they're searchable. But what I tend to do is just like, I have like a link tree in my bio, and I try to help point people to the songs that I have worked on that aren't obviously listed under my name. But if you were to go to, I actually pulled it up because I was like, I know that this is always a question. And particularly for this song, those YouTube comments, they give me like so much. I feel so fueled by them because it's like hundreds of really positive comments about this song and why can't I find it? And I just want to add it to my playlist. So it makes me feel so good. But at any rate, it's on. So if you were to search for Inside Tracks, Modern Holiday Playlist, or Inside Tracks, Your Love, that's how you can find and add this song on whatever streaming platforms you prefer.
Perfect. I'm going to add it to my own library after this call, and then also as well, I'll try and put it in the description if I can find it properly. So, but yeah, it's a bit of a shame that it's like not to kind of talk about the publisher, and I don't obviously want you to like go after them, but it's like in a general sense. Is it just like, are you still frustrated as a musician? Because like, as I said, my friend Adam is a composer. He's like at the mercy of Spotify. He says like, as much as I don't like Spotify for different reasons, he's like, I'm at the mercy of this because if I didn't have it, I wouldn't have all these kind of platforms. Do you just feel quite frustrated as a musician at the moment with like where things are? And like, what can really change, if anything, that would help you more so than anything else? Because you are an independent artist. You're not the Taylor Swift, she's just going to make billions and billions of pounds off of easy, song making. But for you yourself, and I've spoken to other indie artists who have worked on Life is Strange, who have put music in there, the minute you reach out to them, they jump up and down in joy just because it gives them a platform to talk about it. But what kind of needs to change as a musician that can help you, if anything?
I mean, so many things. And yes, I am frustrated. The music industry can be incredibly challenging. And in the streaming era, if I had been a musician in the 90s, maybe things would have been different. I don't know. But in the streaming era, it's as people have talked about at length, it's incredibly hard to make a living. There's really no money in it unless you can do Taylor Swift numbers. And even then, I'm sure for her camp, it feels like this is not enough money for what we are putting into this. So that is incredibly challenging. And I'll say like that is a strategic reason why I do sync licensing, and why I care maybe a little bit less about my name being attached to things or having like a really consistent genre when you search for my name on streaming platforms. Because for me, what I really love is just creating music, and I love a lot of different genres, and I want to try to create in different genres. Like your friend creating K-pop, like yeah, like bring on the challenge of creating something that I've never done before. So for me, that's where like the enjoyment and so the sort of journey is. So if I can do that and make a little bit more money because of the synchronization to video, everything is video now. It's a strategic move, and it means that I set aside the any of the goals or dreams of like being a touring artist or having notoriety in that way. But I think that's okay because I like my life here. I like my routine. I've got my home studio. Like I am in my own way a successful musician. It just looks different than what that looked like 15, 20 years ago.
No, I absolutely understand you because like it's about chasing the music and not the numbers. Because I do it with my YouTube videos and stuff. Like I always have people come and it's like, this is incredible. It's like so much Life is Strange stuff. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, that's the algorithm game, and I kind of don't let the numbers chase me. I just do the content, produce it, and get it out there as much as I can under people's noses. So I completely understand you from at least a YouTube content creation side, and hopefully things change in some way, shape, or form in some kind of way positive for musicians. But I kind of want to move things back to True Colors for a moment because you kind of mentioned it before with the queer musician of like Steph, beanie lover. You have the same name as it's a thing with Deck 9 games. They love beanies. Like every character just seems to have a beanie, but Steph is the antithesis of a beanie, if anything.
Yeah.
But like, you both share the same name. Again, another coincidence. But I'm kind of curious as well. You mentioned off this video to me, like I'm not a gamer and stuff. I'm like, perfectly understand Steph. Like people always understand that with the actors when we bring them on, they're not gamers. But I'm kind of curious, like, what did you make of Steph when you saw her? Did you kind of want to like learn a bit more about her? Because obviously that music is so heavily associated with her in the Wavelengths DLC, and it feels so natural considering, like you said, it wasn't even necessarily like something specifically designed for her in the first place. But I'm kind of curious, like, what did you think of Steph when you saw her and then learned a bit more as well? Were you fan of the beanie? Do you not like beanies?
I honestly, like, my mind was kind of blown at the parallels. I wear beanies. If it wasn't 100 degrees Fahrenheit here today, I would be wearing a beanie right now. I love hats. I'm like always in a hat. If you go on my Instagram channel, like you'll see I'm often wearing a hat. Yeah, it just was, and down on like these tiny details. There's an illustration of Steph in like this sort of red flannel shirt wearing a beanie and whatever. And so when I found out that the song was being used, it was like mid-October. So I actually dressed as her for Halloween like 2 weeks later. And it was such a tiny reference, but it was really for like my family who knew that I had just scored this awesome placement. But yeah, I did. I did some digging. I read about her character a bit more. Chris, the guy that called me to tell me that I got it, he is a gamer, and he actually found the scene that the song is in, and he like screen grabbed it, sent it to me so that I could see, exactly how it's being used. So it was just like a cool exploration. And quite honestly, I'm blown away from like a video game development standpoint at how character driven these games are. When I watch some of the clips of Steph on YouTube, and there's like, she's like sitting in the Rocky Mountain Trader, and she's listening to Phoebe Bridgers, and it just is, I don't know, there's like this whole storyline. It's really incredible because, I grew up on like Mario, like early Nintendo games. So to see how far that has come is quite incredible. And yeah, the parallels between the two of us. I honestly, there was a moment where I was like, did they like pick my song first? And I learned that Steph had existed well before they decided to use my song, but it just was really coincidental.
No, that's really cool, and especially with like even with that photo as well. If you have it, you should tweet at Katy's Katy Bentz voice. Katy Bentz, who is Steph's performance capture actor. She would love to see that because like she's cosplayed as Steph before. But I'm kind of curious as well because I know that you haven't watched like the full game, you haven't played through all of it, but like obviously like Katy is heavily associated with that character. She played her voice in Before the Storm, then she became full performance capture. Steph evolved into this kind of like LGBT plus like icon for a lot of people in the Life is Strange series, and then like Katy has kind of like put her like she wears that character's like she wears it on her sleeve every time she puts a performance in there. She like loves that character, adores it. I'm kind of curious what you make of her performance and like just hearing her voice and like how she brings this different this different personality to a character like that really resonates with people.
Yeah. Well, I from what I've seen, I feel like it's pretty authentic. I don't know if she herself is, a queer person, but I feel like the community is always longing for more content where they can be seen, where they feel represented. And I'd say that her performance feels really authentic to like what that person is. And as someone who is a musician, I haven't owned a record store. I worked at a record store. Like I live the life essentially of that character. It's interesting to see someone bring that to life. I would be curious to know if she like what her connection is, if anything, to that character, because she's done a great job.
Yeah, she kind of made it her own character when it was in Before Storm. This is like an original character that was in the prequel to the first Life is Strange game, and they kind of created her in that universe. And then it became quite popular, and then they moved her to a centralized role in True Colors. And it's more so associated with the Deck 9 character because that's the studio making it there. It had this really original creation. People love that character. And then obviously in itself has been amplified by Katy's performance, who I felt should have been nominated for a BAFTA in that game, but wasn't, unfortunately. And it's a shame that she wasn't because she was very good in it. But in True Colors as well, it's kind of put on here because, you're not a gamer, but your music's in the game. Has there never been an interest to play True Colors or get your partner to play it and be like, you play it so I can watch the entire game?
So Chris always encourages, like, you got to get this, like, just for the sake of like experiencing it yourself. And I don't know, because again, I haven't done it, but I heard that it's like pretty deep into the game. I feel like I would just fail and never find wherever that moment happens. He spent like, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours trying to get there. I don't know. I feel like so ill-equipped to like play a game like that. I wish I could. I wish I could like snap my fingers and do it well enough and get to that moment, but I just haven't. I haven't gone through with that. I really ought to. I owe it to the character to do it.
You should. It'd be worth it. I think you'd very much vibe off it if you ever do get to that point. But I'll move away from True Colors, obviously, and we mentioned very early on, Abby Nissenbaum came on here and talked to me, and we'll kind of get into her pitch in a little bit. But she worked on it. She brought her song "Perfect Crime," which I listened to a lot. When she gave me the pre-mastered version, it was I can see Steph Trivison has worked on that because of when I listen to Your Love, it tells you can see the style with it. But I'm kind of curious, like. What are your thoughts on the song that she made, and then also like producing the magic behind it? Give us an insight into that, because Abby, thankfully kind of gave us an insight into how you work. But then, like, run us through that when she got in contact with you, and what was it like to make the music with that on that track?
Sure. Well, yeah, Abby's a great songwriter. She's her lyrical style is really interesting to me. It's very open book, like very vulnerable, and saying, it's almost conversational. It's like saying exactly what's on her mind. So it's been interesting to work on. I've done 5 songs total. Not all of them have been released yet, but I've done 5 songs with her. So Abby reached out. I think she saw the YouTube video or something, and she was like, "Oh, I gotta like find this person." So she reached out really at just like she had great timing. I was just starting to not move away, but introduce, instead of just producing for myself, I was producing for other artists. I had gotten to a point where I was like, okay, I like know how to do this. Let's see if I can help other people. So she came to me with an initial song that I think she wanted to reference. Muna was the artist she wanted to reference. And it was like a, sort of a pop dance kind of track. But so Abby comes to me with like a demo, which she described as cringy when you guys talked. They're not as cringy as she's suggesting, but a demo with just like very bit, okay, here's the chord changes, here's the progression, here's the harmony, and then I take that and build like the whole instrumental track around it. So it's been cool. She's given me a lot of freedom to just kind of like do what I think is most appropriate based on her references and the lyrical content. But yeah, it's been cool to work with her. And when she got, this Perfect Crime song, she told me about the connection to this like next game,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm hopeful for her that something can come through. I wished I could could have helped her get it placed, but like it was so happenstance. It's just like someone happened to pick that song, so I don't have that much sway in the Life is Strange world.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but you never know what can happen with it. And just in the track as well, when you give your feedback, do you give it just from a producer's perspective, or do you give it as a musician's perspective, like overall feedback? Or
Yeah. I feel like I can't separate the songwriter and the musician from the producer. So for me, it's all in one, and it's why I think like if I were an artist looking for a producer, I probably would look for someone like that. Like, you've been there, you've done that, you have experience songwriting, you've arranged things, whatever. All of that goes into my feedback. I try though as much as possible to keep like their original intention intact and
Mhm.
just elevate where I can, or make suggestions that are like, hey, I really think we should do this chord change instead. But it's their project. I want to stay true to what they're going for.
So, like, just out of curiosity as well, because she's made this through you and you've been working together, would she have had a better chance to get this in the game if it was through sync licensing as you've done? Or, like, it's not guaranteed per se, but, like, would it be a better option if it was through sync license? So obviously, we didn't have that much hindsight, like, foresight to see something
Right.
like this, but would it be is it more easy to get the music in because you do sync licensing rather than just being an independent artist?
So, reaching it's totally possible that she can get in touch with the kind of like music supervisors for the game.
Hmm.
However, music supervisors are inundated with requests from artists. So their preference is to work with those publishers. They have these
Hmm.
established relationships with publishers, and they say, this is what we're looking for. What do you have? Now, that's not to say that Abby couldn't get the song that we created into one of those publishers, but it changes sometimes it changes the game a little bit. Sometimes when you sell a song like that, you lose certain rights to it. You lose maybe the masters, or you're making your song available for all kinds of opportunities, not just the video game opportunity. So there are some trade-offs there. This was a great example. This publisher that I worked with, if she were to send her song to that publisher, there's a chance that it could be used.
Hmm.
But when published on streaming, her name wouldn't be on it, just like my name isn't on it.
Hmm.
So you have to weigh those trade-offs. How much is it of value to you for it to be listed under your name and be like an artist release, or is it more of value to try to get it used on some kind of TV or video game platform? So, you gotta like pick and choose and be okay with that. And that's maybe a challenge that she and other artists like her might run into. It totally happens. There are lots of like sync licensing boutiques and agents who will just let you be an artist and produce artist stuff.
Hmm.
But then there are others that won't. So it's you got to like have the right connections to some degree and be willing to let go of some rights and things like that.
No, it's very interesting. I'm going to use Abby to the side here because I want to get your perspective on that, because it's
Mm-hmm.
fascinating because like in itself with the industry, we've seen it a couple of years ago with like Taylor Swift getting her licenses back and then doing her rewrites of the songs and kind of recording them. But I'm kind of curious, where do you stand on it? Like not in this context of this publisher, but like are
Sure.
you someone who doesn't do this kind of like relationship where you'd have to like sell off your name and you lose rights to your music? Because I know that from artists I've spoken to, it's such a fine line to tread, because you're basically, whilst you have the opportunity, you can have a once in a lifetime opportunity and your music will be out there, you're trading off so much in terms of artistic creative freedom and everything else. But where would you stand? Say if I came up to you and I was like, Steph, I want to put your music in the game, but you have to sell over all these rights and stuff. Would you agree to the deal with me, or would you be like, I can't agree to that?
Yeah, I think it depends on what I've created. So like if I'm working on, I have a project that I'm planning to work on next year that is very intentionally, I want it to be more of an artist release. I want it to be more of like who I am. Um, that I would have a harder time selling than the stuff that I know I'm creating for that specific purpose or trying to get it on TV or whatever. So it depends on what your goals are, what you're trying to do. For me, it's I would create with two very different purposes. You know, like this one, I know I'm not going to want to sell. This one, I'm totally fine selling. So yeah, depends on the situation.
No, it's interesting to hear, and I'm going to bring Abby back in here because you've worked with her, and I kind of found her like, when I spoke to her off the actual recording, I said to her, I was like, if I come across as mean, you're gonna have to like, brace yourself, because it's that kind of perception. Like, I gave her the platform to talk about it because she put herself out there with the TikTok, but then I did say like, why you? Because even if I'm going to try and make the pitch and defend you and say that there's lineage with Steph Trivison doing it because Steph Trivison's got her music in it, you're not Steph Trivison, for example. And Abby, please don't get offended whilst I'm talking about you in this kind of way.
Yeah.
You're very lovely, but it's like, I said to her, I was like, why should your music be in it? Anyone would say I'm a musician, my music should be on it, and you're on this platform giving her all this stuff. But she took it on the chin and she said like, it's a fair question, and she kind of rightfully defended herself in that position and kind of gave herself that space. But I'm kind of curious as well, like, she put herself out there with that TikTok. And I think she's quite an interesting person to like look towards as a musician. So I kind of wanted to ask you, what kind of traits do you think she embodies as a musician that an aspiring artist should kind of like look at and be like, that's something that you should take on board if you want to become a musician?
Yeah. Well, I would say at the bare minimum, your music has to be good, if not great. You can't just get by with some like track that you put together. So like the baseline is good music, and there are thousands and thousands of musicians who are creating good music right now. It's super accessible. I like I said, I have a home studio. Like I can create now in ways that 30, 40 years ago, you would have spent tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands to create stuff. Right. So the entry point is like way lower than it's ever been, which means that lots of people are creating great music. So that's got to be the baseline. What I think Abby does incredibly well is she and I don't even know if she's intentional about this, but she's a real like goal setter. Like she goes after what she wants. Contacting me, for example, like not everybody who hears a song and is a musician has the foresight and the initiative and the follow through to say, I'm going to find that producer. I'm going to find the person who sang this song and see if I can work with them. That requires like a certain level of persistence and grit. And I feel that if you are going to have success in today's music industry, you have to be savvy in those ways. And Abby has put herself out there on TikTok a bunch. She's gotten like partnerships with like a coffee roasting company. I mean, she like a tea company. She is definitely like knows how to play the game to her benefit and like really market herself well and just going after what she wants. Like she wants to get perfect crime in this Life is Strange game, so she's trying to figure out how to do that. She's talking to you, she's talking to press, right? She has a connection at I think, I forget where they work, but I think it's the video game developer. So like, she obviously asked like for my advice. Unfortunately, there wasn't like much to give there. So I think she works those angles, and that's a really important thing as a musician, is you have to understand this day and age, you have to be a business person. You have to be really savvy. And I think she does that well.
No, I completely agree, because I respected her for doing the TikTok, because right. It comes across as so confident, and then it's not necessarily as that. It's just that she put herself out there, and I've experienced it myself doing it on this channel. The amount of people I've had to like reach out and take rejections from, and they haven't come on. It's just so frustrating. But you have to try and weather it and then move forward. So I completely understand that. And with Abby as well, one of the things I found with her music, she said like the LGBT plus stuff is such like a central core theme for her. I'm kind of curious yourself. Is there a certain theme that kind of intertwines itself into your music, or is it not as kind of like prominent as it is with Abby, for example?
Yeah, that in particular, the LGBT stuff, I've been, there have been a couple of opportunities where like I did a couple songs for Warner Chappell Production Music. Warner Chappell's a really big music company. And they specifically wanted like, I think they were doing like a Pride record last year. And so I was like, all right, let's lean into that. Though I feel like I probably that's less of a focus for me. In fact, I'm like totally fine singing, songs about relationships with men. Like it doesn't, like there's no, I think of it as you're connecting to audiences. And so like, what is the particular audience that you're trying to reach, and how do you create something that is authentic to them? And I think it always has to come from an authentic place, but like, no matter like the pronouns I'm using in the song, like to me that doesn't matter as much unless I'm really intentionally trying to represent a specific audience. So it's important. But what I'll say too is that I've always been a person who is very melody first, lyrics second. And so that might be the result of that as well. Abby, in my opinion, Abby feels very like lyric first. So that storytelling and that need to express herself and her experiences is very front and center of her writing. Whereas for me, it's maybe just like, it matters less to me. And I want to create like a good sonic palette. And then I make sure that the lyrics are telling an authentic story, but it's like the afterthought.
No, that's all very interesting. And it's obviously really great to talk to Abby, and, I hope she gets some music in that. But speaking of which, about yourself, if you had any music that would be a good fit for Double Exposure, the new Life is Strange game, what would it be? Obviously, the main focus is to get Abby's music in there, of course. We need to reiterate that. But, you've done a lot of music. Is there any music that you think personally that you can plug here that someone should listen to and think, hey, this could actually be a good fit for Double Exposure, the new Life is Strange game?
That is a really interesting question. I would probably want it to be something that's in the same vein as Your Love. I'd want there to be like a consistency there. It's reminding me of a song called Clumsy Love. Funny, Your Love and Clumsy Love. There's a song I did called Clumsy Love, and I actually think it might be through the same, it's through the same publisher even. There's a certain like danceable, polished pop kind of vibe there, and super hooky. I really have loved that song. That was another one I did kind of around the same era as well. It's less rock. It's a little bit more like R&B leaning, but I think that one could be a good fit for like the connection from one game to the next.
Okay. So on that, if for example as well, you were going to make a licensed track for this, like bespoke, what would you go for? I'm going to put you in the spot here, like get the creative juices flowing, and like if I said I came to you as Steph, we're going for the sync process. I'm like, we need music here. What kind of track would you create for this? Because I imagine you've seen Double Exposure Life is Strange, like the trailer, at least in the footage.
Right.
You've got a kind of a big return of Max Caulfield, who's the main character. The games are very much a supernatural murder mystery game that they're kind of focusing on. What kind of song would you compose? Because obviously it's very interesting to hear all the perspective you gave us on Your Love and the Veruca Salt stuff, the influencer stuff. But what kind of things would you like kind of gravitate towards just off the top of your head?
Yeah, I mean, like the lyrics would definitely be, if I were creating custom bespoke music for that, I would focus the lyrics very much around character development and trying to like, kind of pinpoint what that thing is. The like mystery element of it, I feel like is beneficial from a songwriting standpoint, because you can, there's just more flexibility. There's more freedom to like, say things that are maybe less on the nose and more like, ooh, you can like take different things from what we're saying here. The music, I'd probably go less poppy then, and maybe a little bit more like singer-songwriter, maybe a little bit more like solemn, or I'm thinking of the example that I saw actually in the other one, the Phoebe Bridgers example. Like, is there some kind of maybe a little bit more emotional and raw sounding recording? I think that could be interesting for that vibe. But in the same token, like what Abby's doing with Perfect Crime, it's like it's kind of heavy at times. Like the chorus is sort of like really distorted, fuzzy guitars. So that there's maybe there's a couple different angles you could take it. But I've done custom work in the past. Like we were hired to do a Care Bears song. I'm like the voice of a Care Bear in one of their shows. And so like it's really about like, how much can I learn about the character that we're writing for and really make this work again in an authentic way. Like I want it to feel legitimate. I want it to feel appropriate for the audience. I don't want to dumb it down in any way. It needs to really work. So I'd probably do a lot of homework on what that storyline is going to be and try to build around that.
I like that approach. And I'm a bit time conscious because obviously we've been going for a while.
Sure.
And we've got 3 Life is Strange questions and then 1 final question to ask you.
Sure.
So on the Life is Strange one, this is going to tap into your inner musician. Because I always say to my co-host Adam on my podcast, Strange Cast, I always say he's his own worst critic. Yeah. He really is. Like, oh my God, like the amount of times like this man has like made music. Like and it's just criticism after criticism at times. And I'm like, and this is obviously in between him actually like making great music and he's really proud of it. And he's like, will sometimes come across and they'll say, this is great. But then other times he'd be like, oh, but we're going to talk about your love here because 2 questions in one, which is on a scale of 1 to 10 in like where we're at now, how would you rate this song on that scale? And then if you could change anything, would you change anything? Not to say that it needs changing, by the way. I'm just quickly preferences in this. This is not an insult, but it's like just in the terms of the music artist becoming a critic of their own work. Yeah. Where would you stand on it? Your love, score wise, and then also if you would change anything or if you could improve something with the knowledge that you have.
Yeah, I think I knew when we were creating it that it felt really good. So, but I think the reception of it has made me feel better about it than when we created it. So I would put like, I'd call it maybe like a 7. Like I think it's it's a fun song. Is it a work of art? Like no, but that's not really its intention. Its intention is to be fun and create a vibe. So I'd call it, like a 7.5 or something out of 10. And in terms of changing it, I probably would I wouldn't have the Christmas lyric. I would go back to the original, like pure intention of the character. Christmas, it's my favorite time of year. It's just like a subtle reference. It just makes it a little bit cornier than I normally would have written. So I'd probably change that. But sonically, like it's so hooky. It's really fun. I'm really proud of it. The bridge, that sort of like soaring bridge moment. Everybody who has commented on that song mentions this bridge, and I feel proud of it.
No, I respect the honesty and the humbleness as well, because if it was me, I'd be like, it's a straight 10. If I was like, I'm just going to be like straight 10. But no, I think it's more than a 7 personally speaking, and I think it's aged very well as well. I think people will vibe off it, and hopefully more people find it. And obviously, as you mentioned before, people can add it to their libraries as well, so you can go and find it, which is a nice thing, because I've seen people kind of scour everywhere for all the licensed music in True Colors, because like, where is this song? I can't find it. And then you kind of have it there where it's hidden away somewhere on the internet because of XY issue. But right. Really great to hear your perspective on that. And these are 2 smaller questions, if anything. I just kind of wanted to hear your insight in it. If you could put one track in a Life is Strange game, any track, what would you pick? And we're not picking Abby's music, and you're not allowed to pick your own music, just to put that as an FYI.
Yeah, well, let's go, because we've already referenced it. Let's go Beach Boys. Let's do God Only Knows, Beach Boys.
Oh, very nice.
It's like a throwback. It could be a moment that, I don't know, a sort of a flashback moment. I think it could be cool.
No, I like that. And I think when you like listen to all the soundtracks, they have such varying style of music. Yeah. And then speaking of soundtracks as well, because obviously like we've had some great songs and like great composers on that, and like the Daughter soundtrack from Before the Storm is like really iconic with a lot of fans in the series. But I'm curious, if you could pick one person or a musician to be a composer on a Life is Strange game in the future, who would you pick? And again, you can't pick yourself, although we would love Steph Trivison to do music for this game. But if you could pick a composer, who do you think would be like a great musician that could go and work on that?
Oh, that's really interesting. You know who I think writes really like complex like songwriter type music that I think would translate well into other compositions, like if they were doing just purely instrumental, or the ability to like write songs for the score or the soundtrack. I think Julian Baker might be an interesting fit. just really like melodic guitar, spacey kind of songs.
Mm-hmm.
But you could go really traditional with like, you could use maybe a movie score type person, a Thomas Newman type character. That might be a little too like up the center, but
Mm.
I don't know. I think there are a lot of fits there.
Oh, I
I'm
know.
thinking, oh,
Yeah.
sorry. I was just thinking also like explosions in the sky. For some reason, I'm like hearing like ambient guitar stuff, but it could be anything.
My go-to one is always, I've always spoken about this before on other podcast episodes. I'd love to like Hayley Williams to make the soundtrack for
Oh
this game,
man.
because like her solo stuff was very good. It was like long awaited when I was wishing that would come out years and years ago. And when she dropped Petals for Armor and Flowers for Vases, it was just great listening to that. And I was like, you got such a Life is Strange vibe with the music you make. Your
That's
vocals
really interesting. Yeah, but like, yeah, her song, like, I'm thinking of Cinnamon or something. Like, there's like a quirkiness, but it's still like poppy and danceable, even though it's like very indie. I think that's a great. I'm changing my answer. I'm going with you, Hayley Williams.
perfect. You just won me over there. I think we have to like crack open the budget because it's going to be big to get. But
Yeah,
no,
right. I love Hayley. I've loved Paramore for their whole existence. So
yeah,
great.
I'm very much. I've kind of like unfortunately drifted away as I got older. I think like the
Yeah.
music has changed massively in terms of the direction, but
Yeah.
I've loved her original stuff that she's done on her own. And then like she even did one of her collaborations with one of my favorite musicians, who's Zed, and they did
Yeah.
Will You Stay the Night, which is like one of my favorite songs. And that was like, I can't tell you, when I was like young kid, my mind was blown at that point. I was like, that's
Right.
like the dream collaboration could ever happen. But her range is phenomenal, and her
She
music
can do
talent is
anything. Like I would bow down to her. If I ever saw her in person, I would get on my knees and bow down and just feel like I'm in the presence of, royalty.
No, absolutely. And just to kind of put insight, because Taylor Swift has done her Eras tour in the UK. She was the supporting act with Paramore on the set, and there were the amount of people that weren't even like vibing off it or like knew who Paramore were, and she was a supporting act, and you could see like half the stadiums empty. I was like, this woman and her band would sell out stadiums across the world, and it's like, that is just a surreal sight for me to see that they weren't embracing that. But as you will, it's a different clientele for her fan base, if anything. So, and maybe they do become Paramore fans, if anything. Steph, final question, if anything, and this kind of loops back onto you here as well, because, as I said, we spoke to Abby, we learned loads of stuff about you producing, you've pivoted towards that. I had a nosy through your website, I had a nosy through like your backstory. How does someone approach you for producing, and what how does that relationship start? Do you like get onto a call with them, chat with them, and then kind of like, agree on something? How does that work? Because I've never worked with a producer. I probably will never work with a producer unless I go through a midlife crisis and drop my rap album at the age of 45 or something. Like, and you will produce that when I do that, by the way.
Thank you.
But
I'm looking forward to it.
I'm expecting your love vibes with that, but with my horrible voice. But I'm kind of curious, like, because if someone is listening to this, because they will probably might even be in a position, Abby, where they're thinking like, I finally found her. How do I get in contact with her? And then what kind of the process is in terms of working with you as a producer?
Yeah. Well, I'll say I'm super accessible. You can find me on social media. You can go on my website, stephtrivison.com. My email there, contact@stephtrivison.com. So like totally, just reach out, DM me, leave a comment, whatever, and we can get in touch. The process is usually it follows. So I tend to work remote. I'm based in North Carolina. A lot of people are not in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So I do a lot of remote production. And so the process tends to look a little bit like, I will meet with the artist to understand what it is they're going for and make sure that we are going to be a collaborative fit to start with. If I don't think that that's true, I'll recommend some other producers who I think could like better bring their vision to life. But I feel like pretty wide ranging in what I've done. So I tend to, as long as I feel like they're going to be committed to the project, I tend to say yes. Like Abby, again, a great example of someone who's like going after her stuff. If you're that person who's really has a lot of initiative and is committed to your work, like we're going to have an easy time working together. So then we get a vibe of like, what are you going for? What are your references? Any instrumentation that you must have or definitely don't want to have, like just kind of outline what that looks like. And then I put together a rough version of where I think the song could go. And before we go too far down a path, I give this like bare bones version so that we can say, is the tempo right? Is the key right? Are we heading in the right sonic direction? And then when they approve it, when they say yes, then I really fully produce the rest of it. And then usually the folks that I work with are just, again, top lining. They're just writing the lyrics, the melody, and singing it. So they will take that track and go to a studio in their town and track the vocals, do the harmonies, whatever. And then they send those files back to me. So I work those into the production. And then if they've hired me to also do the mix and the master, I'll do that for them. If not, I send it off to mixing and mastering engineers. So it's a relatively smooth process now that you can do so much remotely. But yeah, I would say first step for anyone who's interested or maybe like doesn't even know if this is the right path for them, just reach out to me and we can set up a time to chat. I've done it all. So, so I'm happy to just, help provide guidance if nothing else. And yeah, it's cool. It's always a fun time.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect way to end it as well. So thank you, Steph, so much as well, guys. You'll be able to find Steph. We'll put links and descriptions. Go and follow her on social media. Tell her how much you love your love, because, it is common for people to kind of just like, not to know the people behind the music. There's so much tracks and so much music that people find through Life is Strange games, and it's always great to give back. So thank you so much for coming on, Steph. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I will obviously be adding your love to my own library now. I think that was in itself a great incentive for me to get you on here and find out where your love is on my Apple Music, so I will be adding that on here. Guys, one more time, if you are new here, do please consider dropping a subscribe on the channel, like the video, share with your friends, help support the channel, help keep up to date with Life is Strange content. We do a lot of it. We do a lot of interviews. We do podcasts. We do many other things. So do stay tuned with that. Again, one more time, Steph, thank you so much for coming on. Hopefully, Abby's stuff gets in Life is Strange. We continue a lineage, just like your own family with your musical influence. We create a new lineage through that, and then she can pass it back on to someone else. But, life's full of mystery, so we never know. Guys, stay tuned. There'll be more Life is Strange content to come. Had a lovely guest on today. There'll be another one coming in the near future. Take care, guys. See you later. Bye.